Scott Galloway is not only a friend of DLD, and now it's the first time on DLDwomen, he's also an NYU professor for branding. He's an expert on digital branding, and he's an expert in fashion and luxury. It's, I think, everyone who is not interested in fashion. Flo genau. So I think it's what you talk about will be important for all of us.
Thanks.
He also has a think tank. So if you need some advice in the luxury and fashion branding, go to Scott.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. Thank you, and thank you, Berta Media. We're going to pink through this as quickly as possible because we have a lot of ground to cover. I teach for a living, and we begin every class and end every class with this slide, and it's the objective slide, and it's how you hold us accountable for your investment in time over the next 35 minutes. And the objective for this session is to give you greater insight into the intersection between luxury and digital. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes around the context and the timeline of innovation and luxury and how it's turned to digital, and then I'm going to bring up my colleagues who are going to help with a discussion around how they are actually building digital into their efforts with some of their clients. Susan Gilchrist from the Brunswick Group and Dana Gers from Jimmy Choo. So with that, innovation was in beauty and in luxury long before there was talk of microchips or innovation around social media. The Egyptians used to take sediments out of the soil and rub it on their face to bring contour to their cheekbones and their eyelashes. Chinese used to dye egg whites red and used to crush up petals and put it on their lips such that they could communicate wealth and status to their peer group. Even the aristocracy was quite forward-looking. The equivalent of the Federal Reserve or the head of the ECB bank decided to make this extraordinary investment in wigs and makeup and wonderful fashion for the French aristocracy because he thought that this industry would ultimately be the equivalent of the gold mines in Chile, or put another way, that this would be a huge industry for France. And he was very forward-looking. LVMH now has 3 times the market cap of the largest bank in France, and the wealthiest man in Europe is luxury. This is a very big business, and we'll talk more about that. When you think about technology, you don't traditionally think of luxury, but luxury's roots are in innovation. The birth of the modern perfumery industry was crunching that wonderful jasmine from the Provence region and then applying it with the science from Swiss, German synthetic and chemical manufacturers that gave birth to a scalable scent that could be put around the globe based on a regional fragrance. The catalytic converter, or the microchip, we think of as being probably the greatest technology in terms of machinery, but for the 200 years before that, the greatest innovation in machinery was the small movements inside a watch. Modern day, luxury continues to innovate around technology. I don't know how many of you have seen Paris to Shanghai social media programming that Vuitton has done, or looked at e-commerce around the world. Hugo Boss just launched e-commerce in China. L'Odyssée de Cartier is doing unbelievable things across media, integrating their offline and online to bring wonderful brand stories, and even building personalities and new icons of luxury vis-a-vis these new social media. Embracing new channels. The hottest social media platform in the world is not Facebook, it's WeChat. It's gone from 200 million people to 400 million in the last 6 months. And maybe the first global brand to come out of China instead of global brands going into China. It's the top 10 download in 26 different markets. And the first category to embrace WeChat, which is a social media platform born on a mobile phone, was luxury. This has resulted in a great business and a growing channel. E-commerce and luxury is outpacing traditional e-commerce. E-commerce is growing about 11% in the US year on year and about 14% in the EU. And as you can see, luxury's had a lot of pent-up demand because they've been late to the party. So this is oftentimes the fastest growing channel for these brands in both Europe and the US. These are not big numbers on top of small numbers. These are growth rates on top of businesses that are already quite big, sometimes in the tens or the hundreds of millions of dollars. Technology is also redefining luxury. We think of luxury as having a car service. Now with Uber, you can pick up your phone and using geolocal sniffing, it can figure out where you are, text message you when the car arrives, take you to where you need to be, and you just get out using a credit card. Burberry's done amazing things. Most retailers take their offline store and try and mimic it online. Burberry, with the Regent Street store, has decided to take their offline store and mimic their online store. You can take a trench coat off a rack, scan an RFID code, and up pops your purchase history and more information on the product. Clinique is actually using a skin diagnostic program on iPads within Macy's, and what they found is that when someone begins interacting with an iPad, they're more likely to convert to purchase than when they begin interacting with a sales associate at the beauty counter. Technology and innovation doesn't have to be necessarily linked to digital. This is my personal favorite in terms of an example of great innovation. Mandarin Oriental in Tokyo has this wonderful technological innovation where if you forgot your charger, need your room service in the morning, want a newspaper, they come to a trap door, they put it in the trap door, they turn on a light, you go to the trap door, you take your thing out. And for people like me who are paid all day to be extroverts and charming and are actually neither of those things, the opportunity to relax and not interact with people is really a wonderful innovation. So why should you care? Luxury is the best business in the world. I'll repeat that again. This will add more shareholder value and create more wealth than any industry in the world, including technology, alternative energy, and it's largely a story of demographics. For all the bad headline news, there's an incredible consumerization of the world taking place. We are now only 1/3 of us are consumers, meaning we can afford things beyond basic health care, education, and housing. That's flipping to 2/3 in the next 15 years. And these people want to express themselves, they want to demonstrate who they are, they want to be attractive to their friends, they want to demonstrate success and show why they're different. It's a human instinct. Don't judge it, just accept it. It's wonderful, and it's created huge industries. Most of that growth will come out of the emerging markets. The reason these brands are embracing digital is not out of goodwill, but because brands that have better digital have better stock performance. At NYU, we track 2,100 brands' digital performance. The brands that have better performance are outperforming their peers with worse performance from a shareholder perspective. These are the stock performances of the world's largest beauty brands. The green line is the S&P. As you can see, beauty has been an unbelievably robust business over the last 5 years. Most people tend to think of luxury as a cute little niche business. It's an enormous business. The New York Times, probably the most influential media company in the world, or the most influential newspaper company, has a $1.9 billion market cap. That's only 1/6 the size of the market capitalization of Michael Kors. WPP, the largest communications firm in the world, hugely influential, enormous market cap, almost 22 billion, still less than the market capitalization of Estee Lauder at 26 billion. But let's think really big. The largest telecom in this unbelievable economy, Germany, Deutsche Telekom, with a market cap of 49.4 billion, still not worth as much as the company that makes Panerai, Van Cleef, and Cartier, Richemont, with a market cap of 51 billion. This is a huge business. It's also a meaningful business because of the shareholder value it's created. The reason it's a profound business and relevant to a conference and a gathering such as this is it's one of the few industries where the people buying the products are the same demographic as the people recognizing equity value. Elizabeth Arden, Helena Rubinstein, Estee Lauder, selling cosmetics out of their trunks, figuring out ways to borrow their brother's pharmacy and chemical instruments to produce creams that could keep people looking and feeling good about themselves. This is my favorite story. This is a woman named Sarah Breedlove who was born into slavery in 1867 in the Mississippi Delta. She's in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first woman to make $1 million by her own achievements. Or put another way, she's the first self-made millionaire in America. This is her driving around her car. She used to drive her friends around in her new car. How did she get to $1 million? She lived in a household where the water was so foul that their hair literally fell out. So she began mixing sulfur with potions. She escaped that household at the age of 14 because she was being abused in that household and went on the road and began selling these potions. And again, the first self-made millionaire in America. On an inflation-adjusted basis, it would be more likely to see someone in front of a Gulfstream 5 than in front of a car in the early 19th century. And this woman, because of beauty, because of innovation, because of risk-taking, was that person. Fast forward to today, there are a lot of women not only building value, but accreting value through their large ownership stakes in this industry. I would challenge you to find another industry that foots as well from the users of the industry to the people who are actually deriving the equity value. So with that, we're going to move to the panel part of our conversation. I'm going to invite up my colleagues Susan and Dana. So when you think about digital, you could loosely bucket it into two places. It could be used to build awareness, and those are great intangible associations that make us feel elegant or make us feel youthful or intelligent or sophisticated or smart. And then there's just selling stuff, using it as a channel, right? Which of the two would you prioritize in terms of what's working for you at Jimmy Choo or what's working among your clients? And I'd like you to pick one or the other. I'll start with you, Dan.
We're not selling a functional product. I mean, yes, it serves a function. I mean, you walk in your shoes, you carry a handbag, but we're selling a dream. We're selling a feeling, really. And it's about how Jimmy Choo makes you feel. And we like to think it makes you feel glamorous, it makes you feel powerful, it makes you feel luxurious, beautiful, strong, all those things. And so, I mean, that's really what luxury is about. It's about creating a sense of a dream and a feeling.
So you say it's about the branding.
Yeah.
And can you give me
That being said, the product absolutely needs to stand up to the promise of the brand. It needs to be exceptionally well made and exceptionally designed and beautiful and new and luxurious and fashionable and all those things. But there's lots of beautiful product out there. I mean, what differentiates one brand from another is the aura around it.
Susan?
I would definitely say engagement. Brand engagement is everything. And the reason I say that is the greater the brand engagement, the greater the propensity to buy and continue to buy. So I think that's absolutely essential. And to give you an example, I think in this today's world, in the today's communications world, the whole era of transmitting messages is kind of coming to an end. And it's much more about brands engaging in conversations and being part of the dialogue. And a great example of this is with one of my clients, and a company you know well, which is Burberry, which incidentally has a female CEO and a female CFO, which is good news. And they very early on decided that they needed to do two things. One, connect with their heritage, which was the trench coat. And secondly, to be digital, to connect with the millennial consumer. And back in 2009, they launched a great site called The Art of the Trench. And what that was a site where people could post pictures of themselves wearing their trench coats in different and stylish ways. And it was an amazing take-up of this, and actually the site has had 22 million views of people posting themselves in their trench coats, and it's been completely and utterly global. And I think it's a very good example of brand engagement, which will have led to higher sales, but through a real conversation with the consumer. And just to touch on one other thing that Scott threw up, I think in luxury, it's been such a private, exclusive industry. It was actually quite slow to come to digital, and it's now really, really catching up. And the two reasons it did was first, as Dana knows better than anyone, the luxury consumer is highly global, highly mobile, and highly digital. And secondly, as Scott showed in his slides, the big growth for luxury brands is in emerging markets. And the luxury consumer in emerging markets is incredibly young. 80% of high net worth people in China are 44 or under. That compares to 30% in the US and only 20% in Japan. So all those things have led to a different kind of brand engagement, and it very much is engagement, not just transmitting messages.
So at these conferences, we're big fans of finding really compelling ways to spend money. Yeah, you can't come to one of these things and not walk out and feel like you need to spend another $10 million on amazing different platforms and social media. Where do we spend less money? Do we spend less money on print? It's got to come from somewhere. Stores? Where do we save money?
Well, Jimmy Choo is in a fortunate position in that the company's been growing at a phenomenal rate since its inception. So we've been able to increase our spending overall. But it was always much more of a startup mentality from the beginning. So we've always had to be very clever about where we invest our money. And social media was a genius tool for that reason, because it's readily available and it's low cost to function. Same thing with public relations. Now that we're a little bit bigger, we are investing more in traditional media, but digital has become an increasingly bigger part and portion of our overall marketing spend. And I would say proportionately where we're decreasing is more in the traditional print media. It doesn't mean that we're spending less with the media partners that we have, but the proportion is more on digital and less on traditional print. And that's just a common reflection about where people are spending their time and energy now too. It's much more online. You're getting your information, be it your news, your fashion inspiration, from online channels versus just traditional media.
Susan?
And I've seen clients really beginning to switch, exactly as Dana says, the budget from traditional print media ads to more digital. And I think in the next couple of years, we'll see a switch where it's coming towards about sort of 40% is digital of the 100% ad budget, but I can see that's going to switch to over half in the next few years. But I think the other thing that's important is not everything you do digitally is that expensive compared perhaps to some of the traditional ad things. So I think you can actually make digital go much farther than the traditional ad spend. And I think companies are becoming alive to that. A whole load of brands are looking at ways they can use Instagram, but that's self-generated, user-generated content. It's not the brands having to spend lots of money, but that gets a real buzz. And some of the big brands like Tiffany and Swarovski have got over 1 million followers on Instagram, or nearly 1 million followers on Instagram. So there's a lot of creative things you can do.
So that was the scripted part of the program. Now I'm going to ask some questions they weren't expecting. So give me the program that surprised you, both in terms of good and bad. What program in digital worked? What was a total bomb? Dana?
I know this is going to sound terrible, but we haven't had any big failures. I mean, we've had things that worked really well on some metrics, and then less well on others. I mean, we did launch a program last year to support our sort of day to evening shoe category. We have a collection of our sort of ongoing, eternally available styles, which is designed as the perfect wardrobe, and it's called 24/7. It's designed for people like us, who need something to go from day to night. And we launched a user-generated photo gallery where people from all over the world could upload their photos, and it became an amazing lens through which you could see the Jimmy Choo style. We had women in Jakarta and women in Sao Paulo and women in London, New York, and Milan, the traditional fashion capitals.
Just an example of that. How do you measure the return on investment? Everything's been successful. How do you define success in a program?
Not everything was successful. I mean, we had some places where there were super active, avid users, and then some markets where they were just browsing and not participating at all. And that's not atypical. The other thing was we launched it and we didn't optimize it for mobile initially, and that was, it was because we were being perhaps too cautious, and we should have absolutely done that, because the way that people take pictures of themselves most often is, with their mobile device nowadays. Those kind of things, that's the beauty of digital also. You can course correct along the way because it's an easy and fast-moving medium.
I think we're about to enter a new stage, because I think the personalization of digital is going to become really significant. We're increasingly seeing the personalization of luxury product, but I think with the amount of data that companies have and what they're going to use that to actually really personalize and target you, knowing what you buy, where you bought it, what social media you use, I think that's going to actually generate a very specific and very clear ROI. So I think luxury is going to move in that space. And I won't mention names where things have failed, but every single brand has had its moment on social media where it got hijacked. And that is the biggest danger. And when you get hijacked, it's a bad feeling.
So if you listen to CEO earnings calls, or you listen to them at conferences like this one, you would think they were spending 2/3 of their media budgets on digital. And the reality is they're usually spending single digits. It's the music doesn't match the words. What is getting in the way of the spending and the actual action catching up to the rhetoric? Why are brands so fond of this from a perception standpoint, but when you really get into the spend, they're still spending most of their money on traditional media, traditional bricks and mortar? Why doesn't the music match the words?
I don't think traditional media has been obviated by digital media at all. I think there's still a very necessary place for traditional media and print media specifically. You reach an audience, they tend to be loyal, they stay with the magazine, so it's not that one replaces the other. It's that people have more choices now. I mean, if you look at yourselves as an example, you probably, you're looking at Twitter or maybe Instagram or Facebook, and you're getting some news that way, either through your friends or through links. You're also maybe reading your daily newspaper online, you're reading probably a few of your industry newspapers or newsletters online, but then you'll probably sit down with your monthly magazine or whichever one that you're a fan of, if you're a fan of Vogue or InStyle or Elle, and you'll probably read those too. I mean, and you'll watch television, and you may be doing all those things all at the same time, like we all are. You're multi-channel, multi-screening, and that's just the nature of the way we're consuming media now. So I don't think that digital is replacing traditional media, at least not now. And so there's really no need to eliminate the investment, because it would be cutting out a huge form of where your consumer is consuming their media.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, it's additive, not substitutive. But I also think digital is something we're all experimenting in and all learning, and you've got to try lots of things, and some will work and some will fail. And those that fail, just fail fast and get on with the next thing. And I think that's a very important attitude that brands have got to have, and successful brands do have. But I think the other really important thing, and I think Jimmy Choo is a great example of this actually, is that whatever brand is doing, it's got to have a very clear global point of view. Because if you are going to proliferate yourself across all these channels, you've got to be really clear and consistent. And I think that is the hallmark, always has been the hallmark of a successful global brand, but it is never more true today than it has been. And I think that will really make a distinction between winners and losers in the future.
Can each of you name one or more programs or digital, some sort of digital content that has really inspired you? And please, nothing you've worked with, or no clients, or a brand you've worked at, something you're not related to that you see online and you just love the way they do it, whether it's the way they present merchandise or a program or an app or...
I wish I had done a little bit more thinking and not been asked on the spot. But I think Dove is a great example. Actually, I know we just saw it, but I mean, I got teared up when I saw that advertising, and I think from a viral perspective, if you can reach someone emotionally, it always has a huge impact. Video, I think, is an unbelievable medium, and one that will only increase in usage, because there's no better means for telling story than video. I think other case studies that are amazing are some of the social media personalities that have come out through luxury, like Oscar PR Girl, someone who's developed a real voice and a connection to consumers and really created a whole new generation of people who were interested in Oscar de la Renta by virtue of connecting through digital. I also think in terms of innovative companies, this is not luxury, but a company that really just sprung up from nowhere in a very short period of time is an LA-based fashion company really aiming at teens and 20s, but it's called Nasty Gal.
Yep.
And no traditional marketing, no traditional advertising, purely through word of mouth, viral, social media, and connecting with a customer in a very meaningful way has built up a business. It's the fastest growing fashion company in the world, I think, right now.
Yeah, 130 million in sales.
Yeah.
Really impressive.
I mean, not competitor of Jimmy Choo anyway, but interesting.
Yep.
Well, I have to say I love everything that NetSupport does. I actually shop on NetSupport during work conference calls, and that can be really expensive. And I spend a lot of money while I'm on my conference calls. But I think it's an amazing business, an amazing brand. I love the way that it sort of educated me about things to wear. It's not just a transactional site. I think it's inspired the way it's created a magazine. In some ways, Vogue should never have let Net-a-Porter exist, because they could have been Net-a-Porter if they thought about themselves as people of fashion rather than selling magazines. So I think it's an amazing business. And then the other one that I think is really interesting is what Tory Burch does with her foundation. And she focuses on women entrepreneurs who are trying to build businesses, and it's just focused in America at the moment. But she does great digital work with that. And the reason I like that is because we're not just more socially connected, we're actually more socially conscious. And what she's done with her foundation and the way that's reflected back on the brand and the way the brand engages with the work the foundation does, I think is really important.
So there's so many young people in the audience, and we were talking about this last night. This is an industry that's notoriously difficult to break into. A lot of unpaid internships, which means it's sort of relegated to people whose parents are supporting them. Do you have any advice on how to get, let's personalize this. How did you two break into the industry?
I started through the public relations route, and it was not specifically in fashion. It was just in public relations, and I applied for an executive training program, and there were a lot of applicants, and I was lucky enough to be accepted, and then I started from there. But, I mean, fashion and luxury specifically are very difficult to break into because there's not a set career path, and it really is an industry, and it's not unlike entertainment where they really, you start at the bottom. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it's great work experience, even if all you're doing is packing up sample bags for a little while. You learn a lot about the industry. And the best advice anyone ever gave me is when you're starting out is to try and make yourself indispensable and always stay busy. And I think that's probably good advice for anyone at any stage of their career.
How did you break in?
And, well, I came through journalism into what I do now. That was sort of 18 and a half years ago. But when I'm looking at hiring people for our business, and we're in the communications business, but we have a lot of luxury clients, I think people who have the digital social media skills are incredibly valuable. So, compared to 20 years ago when you didn't have much to bring to the table, you now have a lot to bring to the table. So I think people using those skills to get into places, you're valuable. We all want you.
How do you stay relevant? I'm going to assume that neither of you started your careers in digital, and you're both digital players and on panels about digital now. So how do you stay relevant? What are the periodicals or the discipline, or what are you doing such that you can now be invited to conferences? How did you make the transition to talk about digital?
Well, I think if you're curious and interested about the way the world is moving, then digital has to be, on your radar. And I've always been someone who's loved technology, not for the gear aspect of it, but for what it can do for me. And as a communicator, I think technology is the most unbelievable innovation to come our way since the printing press. I mean, it has opened up the pathways to direct communication with consumers in a way that nothing else has. So I stay, I'm curious. I do read a lot. I look to competitors. I follow a lot on my social media feeds of digital newsletters. I talk to a lot of people. I come and speak at forums like this where hopefully I meet lots of interesting and more well-informed people than myself. And you just try and learn constantly.
Susan?
Yeah, I agree with that. Just get out there, get the antennae out is crucial. But something else that I'm doing right now in my firm is that I'm having a reverse mentor, because I'm just at that cusp of being a digital immigrant, not a digital native. And so I'm adopting someone in our San Francisco office who's very connected, knows everything that's going on, and they're in their 20s, and I said, go on, teach me. And I think reverse mentoring is something for people, certainly people of my age, to think about.
So with our last 3.5 minutes, just to try and personalize this and talk a little bit about the industry, I'm going to ask you what your biggest disappointment professionally has been and how you recovered. And I'll go first. I'm a professor. We're usually overeducated. I applied to 9 graduate schools and I didn't get into any. And I had to move home. And fortunately, my mom rewrote my applications and I got in the next year. But that was not a stellar moment for me. And now I'm comfortable talking about that. What really big disappointment professionally?
Well, that's easy for me. I was 5 months pregnant, and a new CEO came in and decided to eliminate my department. So being 5 months pregnant and losing your job is a pretty frightening proposition, especially as you're embarking on a renovation of your house and having to pay mortgage and bills at the same time. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I rebounded, was able to find a new job while I was pregnant, which I would not recommend. And learn from it. But it's definitely, that was a disappointing. I really felt let down by the company, and I felt, you know, that it was a great injustice that had been done, laying off a pregnant woman. But, you know, everything is a learning experience, I suppose.
Thanks for that.
So I was expected when I was at school, high school, to get into Oxford or Cambridge, which are really top universities in England. And relevant to the conversation we were actually having this morning, just in the year when I was trying to do all that, I got really bad eating disorders. And so I got very distracted and I didn't get in. And I will never forget that feeling of not getting to what I wanted to do. And I just made a sort of pact with myself that day. I will never let that happen to me ever again. And it doesn't matter what it takes and how hard I have to work or whatever it has to happen, I will not let that happen. So just bottle that feeling, remember it, and just make sure you never get to there again. And that's what I've always tried to do. Haven't always worked, but that's what I've tried to do.
Thanks for that, and I think that's a decent place to end it. All the pictures we showed at the beginning of the session, you would think that all these incredibly successful men and women in the prestige business, that the unifying feature was that they were more creative or they were harder working. There's some fantastic research coming out of MIT and out of the University of Glasgow talking about success and what are the key drivers of success. And all of the research, and this is unusual in academia, is coalescing around one word, and the word is will. And that is having the willingness, regardless of adversity, when you're hit really hard, to just step up and keep persevering. And that's what I tell my students every day, is that the only difference between them and the people that the lives they want to lead is not intelligence, it's not background, it's the ability to get up again and dust yourself off. So with that, we're going to go to our last slide, and we're going to end on time. Our last slide was our objectives. Our objective is how it was to provide insight into the intersection of luxury and digital. On behalf of Susan and Dana, I want to thank you for your time and wish you a good rest of DLDwomen. Thanks very much.